Shalom friends, this is Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet. You can find my site on www.lovingkindness.co. And today we're learning Tanya. Thanks for joining us. Written by the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, 1745 to 1810. We're up to chapter 8. And although in the previous shiur, we did do the first start, we made a start to chapter 8, I'm going to revise it very quickly so that we can get back into the thought process behind what he is talking about in chapter 8. Those of us who have been joining us throughout all the shiurim would know that at this point in time, we'll be discussing the idea of the different types of goodness and evil that there is in the world. Goodness, of course, as a perfection in goodness, is good. But within evil, there are different aspects of evil. There's an evil which is considered outright evil, and no matter what happens with it, we can't change it into something good. And then there is a type of an evil where even though it looks to be on the surface to be evil, it has within it the potential to do good. So for example, if we take, as I always give an example of a computer monitor, you can take the monitor and you can put anything onto it that you would like to. You can put pure things onto it. You can put impure things onto it. Likewise, one can take really any example within the physical world that doesn't have a direct evil attached to it, which probably has this aspect of this middle ground, parav evil or parav good, whichever way we look at it. And this is referred to as the Kelipot. The Kelipot, the husks, refer to the negative aspects of all of creation. And within it, we have evil husks, which cannot be transferred and changed into good. And within it are husks, which can be transferred into good. That's called the Kelipah Nogah. And so the Alter Rebbe begins chapter 8. And it tells us the following point. V'od zos, more about all this concept that we spoke about before. B'ma'achalot asurot, with regards to forbidden foods. Shelekach nikre'im b'shem Assur, that we said that forbidden foods are called Assur. And if we recall before, we described what the word Assur means and the word Mutar means. And it is not what we think it means as in forbidden and permissible, but rather, as we say in the blessing in the morning, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Matir Assurim. And Matir Assurim over there does not mean who permits that is forbidden. Rather, the blessing means who releases the bounds. When we awaken in the morning, we are bound, meaning to say that the body is in a state where, because we are sleeping, it is relatively speaking bound up. It does not move a lot. Of course, the body does move. We move in our sleep, but it is pretty small in comparison to the activities that we do during the day. Yet, when we wake up and the soul is returned to the body, we are able to do many, many things. We become active because the soul unites into the body, gives it energy, and we're able to engage in activity. This is called Matir Assurim. He releases the bound. He gives strength to the body in a way that makes it able to do things. So we speak about over here this idea of forbidden foods, which are called Assur, which are called prohibited. And prohibited does not mean what we think it means just as in the sense of forbidden, but rather that the food that we're eating here, that we're talking about, this forbidden food, is actually food that is held captive, so to speak. It is bound to the sources of evil. We could imagine, for example, that the food has an attack on it, and surrounding the food are military. That's the military that's surrounding the food. And the military have put handcuffs on this food, which means to say they have bound the food to themselves and their own purposes. When we then eat that food, what we are doing is we are partaking of a product which is being held captive, so to speak, which is bound to the forces of evil, and this therefore creates a bad effect within ourselves and in the world in general. We need to stay away from that. And that is why the food is called Assur or Assur. It is called prohibited. So for example, if we take a practical example, it could be for a Jew, of course, that's what I'm talking about here. If we take pork, pig, a Jew may not eat the pig because the pig is Assur. It is forbidden. It means that the source of the pig is bound up into the forces of evil, at least for a Jew, not for a non-Jew. A non-Jew may eat the pig and there's no problem with it whatsoever. The same thing applies to eating meat and milk together, or cooking them together, or deriving any benefits from the meat and the milk, which in this instance, again, we connect with these forces of evil And because we connect with them, we take part of that energy which they are releasing into that particular food or that particular substance that we're talking about. So we say here that this is because a person who eats forbidden food, below hoda, even if he doesn't know that the food is prohibited, and he eats it l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. So, for example, a person went out to eat, and he went to his friend, and his friend told him that he's kosher, but the friend is not really kosher. So the friend puts a steak on the table, and he says, eat and enjoy. B'te'avon. So the fellow says, Baruch atah Hashem she'akol niya bidvaro, and he eats this piece of meat, not realizing that even though the friend told him that it's kosher, it's not kosher, and the friend will never reveal to him that the food is not kosher. And this particular fellow makes the blessing with Kavanah, and he says to himself, when I have the energy that I gain from this piece of meat, I'm going to study Torah, I'm going to put on tefillin, I'm going to fulfill mitzvot. Well, even if this instance happens in this way, la'avod Hashem b'koach achilahi, and he does this in order to serve Hashem with the strength that he gets from this food. V'gam pa'al, and so too this particular person goes ahead, v'asa, and he does what it is, he does this particular thing. V'kara, and he reads his Torah, he studies, v'hitpalel, and he davens, v'koach achilahi, through the strength of this food. Ein hachiyot sheba ole umitlabeshet b'teivos haTorah v'atfila kamo haheter. A person should know that the life force that is within this food does not descend, and it does not enclose itself within the words of the Torah and the prayer, just like something that would be permissible would do. So in other words, when a person eats permissible meat and he makes the bracha with Kavanah and he does all these mitzvot, he causes all of the holy sparks to ascend, and the energy, this good positive energy, reaches a greater height. However, if a person takes forbidden food and he has the exact same intentions, he behaves in the same way, but he doesn't even realize that the food is prohibited. And the reason is because the reason that he can't uplift it is because of its being bound bidei hasitra akra, into the hands of these external forces. Mishalosh klipas hatanayos, within the 3 impure klipas. Remember, we discussed that when Yechezkel and all the other prophets, when they experience their prophecies, it explains over there that they encounter 3 levels of, well, we could call it frustration, challenge, experience, difficulty. Well, what they go through is a stage of, or 3 stages of impurity that they have to break through. When they break through the 3 levels of impurity, they encounter this glowing light, the Kelipah Nogah, this glowing light. And once they get through the glowing light, they're able to enter into these worlds of purity. So this is what we call the 3 impure Kelipot. And anything that we speak about that is Assur is bound up within one of these 3 impure Kelipot.
So Eliyahu, yes? The word Assur only refers to food only?
Assur means anything that is prohibited. So, for example, let's take a forbidden image that we shouldn't look at.
Doesn't make no sense. It's not only food.
Correct. It can be anything. That's right. Anything that we call Assur.
Very good, thanks. That's what I want to clarify.
That's it. Even if it is only a rabbinical prohibition, meaning it's not even a Torah prohibition. It's only rabbinical. The rabbi said, for example, don't touch a pen on Shabbos. I mean, doesn't sound like that's like anything important. I'm not writing. I'm not really breaking Shabbos. That's what's called an Issur d'Rabbanan. The rabbis instituted the laws of Mutar and said we may not touch the pen. Comes out that these 3 impure forces therefore have a hold on that pen on Shabbos, and therefore when we involve ourselves in the activity, even just touching the pen without writing, we bring ourselves closer to it and we cause a problem. You know, it's interesting to think about. Since we're with this virus at the moment, we can compare many comparisons and analogies to this principle of something that we cannot see. But the doctors keep warning us, you know, every time you touch a surface or something, go and wash your hands. How should you wash your hands? 20 seconds. Happy birthday to you 2 times over. Happy birthday to you is 10 seconds. And sing it twice over, 20 seconds. When you clean your hands, scrub everywhere. Take the soap, put it on the one side of the hand, on the other side of the hand. Put it between the fingers, put it underneath the nails. You've got to do this for like 20 seconds straight. Every time you touch a surface, every time you do the slightest thing with your hand, be careful, because if you put that to your eye or to your mouth or any part of the openings in the body, it can infiltrate into the body, and that's it. We get sick, and as we know, we see the results of that. Which means to say, even though we cannot perceive what is happening with the virus, but we can't see it, therefore we say it can't be true that something is actually happening, and yet it is happening. If we put the microscope on at that point in time, we would be able to detect that the virus is in fact present. So too, the same thing occurs over here. The pen on Shabbos, even though it is forbidden to only write on Shabbos, and the Assur of Mutar is only a rabbinical prohibition, nevertheless, the rabbis are warning us that on that pen is the virus, meaning the spiritual virus. Meaning, if we touch that pen, we are cleaving to a spiritual impurity which will have an effect on us. We may not see it, we may not perceive it, we may not understand it, but nevertheless, something is happening over there that is going to cause a change to us. Not necessarily physically, but rather spiritually. Spiritually, something will change within us that makes us worse. That doesn't mean to say that we all become murderers or rapists or do anything violent, but it changes a nature within us that causes us to be less sensitive and disconnects us from Torah, disconnects us from godliness. So as the Alter Rebbe points out over here, that with regards to an Issur de Rabbanan, even a rabbinical prohibition, that we must certainly be very careful about, shechamurim divrei sofrim yoter midivrei Torah, that the rule is that the words of the rabbis are even stricter than the words of Torah. Again, any person who reads this, they'll think it's crazy. How can the words of the rabbis be more strict? Who are the rabbis to tell us what to do? And so on and so forth. Well, perhaps they have an insight into the spiritual world more so than we do. And of course, here we're talking in particular about rabbis who lived many, many hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, when this was written down at that time in the Talmud, 1,500 years ago, when these words were written down, that the words of the rabbis are more strict. It was written down by people who had spiritual microscopes. These people could see spiritually things that we were not aware of and warned us in advance. Take care. And even if you'll never understand why, and even if you'll never have a spiritual microscope to be able to see what's going on, don't touch that pen on Shabbos. Don't touch that money on Shabbos. Don't touch the rock on Shabbos. But it's only a rock. I'm not even doing anything with it. I'm just touching it. Don't touch it. Don't do anything with it. Leave it alone. Or at least don't move it. But touching it could be permissible as long as you don't move it. As long as it doesn't move. V'lachein, and therefore, gam hayetzer hara, so too the evil inclination, v'koach hamisaveh ledevarim Assurim, and the strength of desiring things that are prohibited. This is who shade mishadin lukrain. It's called, in the language of the Torah, the demon that belongs to, of the demons of the non-Jews. That's how it comes out. Lukraim, alien, foreign shadim, as opposed to what? As opposed to a shade which is related, a demon, which is related to the nature of a Jewish demon. Jewish demon and an alien demon or a non-Jewish type of demon is a different type of source, as we'll see in a minute. Shehu yetzer hara shel umas ha'olam, that this particular demon that we're speaking about refers to the evil inclination of the nations of the world. Shenafshosehim yishalosh klipas hatameas, because the nations of the world, the souls come from this aspect of what's called the three impure clippers. Once again, we're not discussing all of this in depth. Anybody who wants to understand more of this concept needs to apply themselves, needs to learn more, especially of the secrets of Torah, to understand the nature of souls, where we are all coming from. It is not necessarily something to be spoken about in an absolutely derogatory manner, but on the contrary, we need to understand how this all fits into the scheme of things. What is a non-Jewish source? What is a Jewish source? What is the source of the Rasha, the Beinoni, the Tzaddik, and all the souls that are in the world? Mashe ein kein, which is not the case. Hayetze hara, when we speak about the evil inclination, v'koach hamisaveh ledevarim hamutarim, and the strength, the power that desires permissible things, lemalos ta'avoso, in order to fulfill his desires. For example, there are two desires. One desire is, I would very much like to eat that filet steak, that T-bone steak. Oh, that's very tasty. Well, of course, it might be very tasty, but it has a connection to some very evil forces. And when we eat it, even though we will be absolutely healthy physically, we'll be very strong. We could even be one of the champion bodybuilders in the world through eating these steaks, eat many of them, and you'll win the title, and they'll pay lots of money to you because you won the title and all sorts of things. We're not saying it's not going to change, it's not going to impact, we're not saying it's impacting you negatively physically, but there is something happening spiritually. And therefore one has to refrain. And if one has a desire for those things which are forbidden, this is the shade mishadin lukrain. However, the other type of desire is when I desire something permitted. For example, I desire chocolate, which is kosher. And I have a slab of chocolate in front of me, and I've decided that I love this chocolate so much I can't put it down. So I eat 100 grams of chocolate in one setting. Most people might just have one piece of chocolate. And even then, the person still had a desire. You know, he didn't eat it because it's healthy. He ate it because it's a desire. Even then, he was still stuck in the trap of desiring something which was not necessarily healthy or served any positive purpose, except for the fact that he was able to quench his thirst and his desire. So this particular desire that we're speaking about for permitted things, Hushayd Mishadin Yehudain, this is of the demon related to the Jewish demons. Lefi, because the reason is because he is able to return it back into holiness, which means to say, kedel, as we said above, which means if a person takes the chocolate that he eats and he had a desire for it, I like chocolate, so I want that piece of chocolate, it's really tasty, I feel good about it, it does me no good, the doctor says to me it's bad for this part of the body and that part of the body, but I really wanted it, so I ate it out of desire. But anyway, it serves no practical purpose. Until when? Until I say to myself, you know, I better turn it into a positive. Even though I ate the chocolate, which was related to something negative, the chocolate in and of itself was permissible. I was allowed to eat the chocolate. I made a blessing on it. It was made from the milk of a kosher animal that had been inspected and checked from the time that it was milked, that a Jew was involved in the production of the milk from the start to the end. All the other products in the chocolate are kosher, no problem. When I now go and daven with the energy that I have gained from the chocolate, or perhaps, for example, the chocolate gives me the strength to give the shi'ur, because before I gave the shi'ur, I felt down, I felt a little bit low, I needed something to wake me up. Well, I could have just had something which was meaningful, could have an effect on the body. The chocolate didn't have to be the thing, but I desired it. Now, I uplift the chocolate to where it should be through using the energy in a positive purpose. I can uplift it. But when it came to the T-bone steak, it doesn't matter how much I try. I will never be able to uplift the energy, the spiritual energy that is contained within the steak, because the spiritual energy is Assur. It is an Assur. It is bound up by the forces of evil. Nevertheless, however, Kodem shechazar likdusha, before it returns to a state of holiness, because it was Kelipah Nogah, was sitting in the middle. Hu sitra achra uklipa. It is really the sitra achra, the other side, meaning the side of negativity, the side of evil, uklipa, and the husks, meaning it's really bad. It's really on the side of badness. V'gam achar kach, even afterwards. Harishimu mimenu nisha davuk beguf, comes out that an impression of it remains cleaving to the body, which means even when I uplift it, there is still a small measure of that desire in that chocolate that remains within the body, which is negative. Liyos, because kimikol ma'achal umashke, the Alter Rebbe teaches us that from all food and drink, na'ase tekef dam ubasar ibsaru, it immediately turns into blood and flesh into one's body. The moment we eat something, it becomes a part of our body. Yes, we are indeed what we eat. And therefore, and that is one of the reasons that we have all these laws of kashrut. For example, one who pays attention will notice that the animals that a Jew may eat are all domesticated animals. We do not eat lions and alligators and various other wild animals, foxes, and all sorts of animals like that, because the nature of these animals is in itself wild and predatory. And they go after other animals, killing them with their claws and various other things. When we eat that lion, we bring that power of the lion into ourselves. For a Jew, that is not healthy. The Jew needs to be balanced. The Jew needs to eat of foods which have the potential of holiness and not of unholiness. The lion, although is a proud animal, is a beautiful animal, is a creature of Hashem. We respect it. We do not touch it. We do not hurt it. We do not shoot it. We love it in the sense of it being a creation of God, but it doesn't mean we eat it. Putting that into our system is dangerous. So we eat the animals that are domesticated, a cow, a gentle animal, a soft animal. And that is what we put inside ourselves. Nevertheless, the moment we eat it, it becomes a part of ourselves. And as a result of that, it still has an effect. And therefore, and especially so, if a person is eating it because out of desire, as opposed to eating it because he needs to eat it, he has a desire to eat it. It's really a nice, tasty piece of meat. As we discussed before, the body has to go through a process called the being hit in the grave, which means to say that there's a purgatory, there's a type of a Gehenna that the body and the soul have to go through together. As the story goes, there was a particular owner of a field, and on the field he had a tree with some fruits that were high up, some figs that were high up on the tree, and he asked two people to guard his field for him, and to guard this tree especially. So one of the people that he asked to guard the tree was a blind man, and the other fellow lacked legs. He was lame. So he asked these two fellows to guard the tree. Anyway, they're sitting and guarding this tree in the field, and suddenly the fellow who doesn't have legs, but he can see, he looks at the beautiful tree and he tells his fellow next to him, who's blind, there's a beautiful tree, and I think we should go and take the fruit. The problem is, he tells the blind fellow, unfortunately, I don't have legs and I cannot get there. So the blind fellow turns to him and he says, well, I have bad news for you. I might have legs, but unfortunately I'm blind. I can't see a thing. So the lame fellow says, well, let's come up with a plan. I that don't have legs, but I can see. Let me go onto your shoulders and I will direct you to the tree. When we get there, we'll get the fruit. So he puts in, the blind fellow puts the fellow without legs on his shoulder, and he takes him to the tree. They take from the fruit and they go back to their guarding station again, having eaten the fruit and enjoyed it. The owner of the field comes back and he says to them, well, what happened here? Were you guarding my fruit tree? They say, absolutely, we never had a thing. He says, I know it was you. So the blind man says, it certainly couldn't have been me because I can't even see the tree. And the person who's lacking the legs says, well, it certainly couldn't have been me because I don't have any legs. How would I have got there? So the owner of the field says, well, I'll show you how it worked. And he then puts the two together and he says, this is how you managed to do that particular action. And you went off and you stole my fruit. And therefore, I will judge you both together as having done this particular deed. And here the same thing occurs. God takes the soul and he takes the body. And when we die, so the soul goes up to heaven and God says, you're liable for certain things. The soul says, what? Me? Take a look at me. I'm in this paradise over here at this point in time. Do you see me committing any averas? Me as a soul, I do nothing. It's the body that did all the averas. And of course, the body is in the grave at that point in time. So the body says, me? I committed any sins? Take a look at me. I'm dead. I'm nothing. Unless the soul is in me, I can do nothing. And therefore, I certainly didn't commit any averas. God says we will make a judgment together. And he takes the soul, he puts it back in the body, and he says, this is how the two of you worked as a team in order to commit those averas, those sins together. The same thing occurs over here. When we are engaged in eating, we are combining our physical and spiritual, especially if the spiritual has not yet been fine-tuned. And therefore we desire things. Then we go after our desires, using the body, using the legs of the blind man. We go off and we get the particular thing that we want that is suited to us, and then we commit the Avera, or we eat the food for our desires. So at this point in time, the Torah tells us, as a result of having gone after these desires, and we have no choice, we have to eat. But there are different ways of eating. Most people eat in the way of desire, and then there are a few people who eat because it's absolutely necessary to eat, and they don't feel that they want to even have a desire of the taste of the food. Those people are absolutely unique, as we will see in just a moment. This is why the body needs to go through this process of Hibbut HaKever, where the soul is returned into the body, undergoing a certain type of a punishment, as we discussed before, and together there is a freedom of both of them, because the evil that is inside the body is knocked out of the body, and the soul experiences the pain of that, because the soul and the body work together in obtaining or allowing the evil to become a part of it. It is not a perfect world, so nobody can get out of it. However, let us see a little bit more that there is one type of person that could theoretically get away from it. And he goes through Hibbut HaKever l'nakoto, in order to clean him, uletaro, and in order to purify him, mitumato, from his impurity, shekibel behanas olam hazeh, from everything that he acquired from the benefits of this world. V'tanugav mitumas Kelipas Nogah v'sheidim yudain, and he also gets cleaned up from all the desires of the impurity of the Kelipah Nogah, this parav klipa, which has been used for the sake of acquiring permitted things, although it is still klipa. The item itself still contains within it some sort of negativity, which still could be up. You could cause it to ascend to a higher level. And also this comes from the Jewish demons. Unless it is one condition, a person would have to be such a person that he never got any enjoyment from this world all the days of his life. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, like Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy rabbi, referring to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said of himself, lifting up his baby finger, he said, I never received enjoyment from this world even so much as my baby finger. What did he mean? Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the editor, the redactor of the Mishnayot, was a very wealthy man. It is said that on his table, he never lacked even summer fruits in the winter and winter fruits in the summer. He had the finest of everything. How could he come along and make such a statement? And the answer, of course, is that even though he had these things, he never used it for his own private enjoyment, his own private desire. He used it exclusively for what it was meant for. Let us give an idea. I once heard this very beautiful story. It's actually 100% true. I heard it from very reliable people. It's a well-known story that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, on one occasion, going back many, many years, of course, we're probably going back now about 35 years or something like that. Whenever he used to travel, he had a specific car that he traveled in. It was already getting old, and the Hasidim decided that they were going to buy him a brand new limousine, so that, befitting a Rebbe, he should drive about in this brand new limousine. So anyway, they bought him this limousine, and the Rebbe walked out of 770 and he saw this car, and he said, what is this? They said, it's your car. And he said to them, no. He said, that's not my car. He said, bring my car. Well, they said, but we just got this for the Rebbe. What are we supposed to do with it? He said, bring my car. And at this point in time, they drove off with that car, and they brought the original car back, and that is the car that he continued to be, that he used to go and be transported in. Meaning to say, he was connected with a particular car. He wasn't looking for the enjoyment of what it means to drive in a fancy car and gain some sort of something comfort out of the car that he was in. Rather, he was attached to the car because of what the car achieved. He wasn't receiving desire from the car. He was receiving the practical purpose for which it was created. And so to Rabbeinu HaKadosh also, he had very beautiful things that he owned. But nevertheless, everything that he owned was used towards Hashem, towards Kedusha. And therefore, when he lifted up his hand and he lifted up his baby finger, saying that he never received any enjoyment, this is what he meant. Everything that he had, he used exclusively for the sake of Hashem, for Torah, for Kedusha. When a person behaves in that way, he can save himself from Hibbut HaKever. When we eat, the famous story of the Chassid, he wanted to see what makes his Rebbe a Rebbe. So he looked through the keyhole one day of his Rebbe's room, and he noticed that the Rebbe was making a blessing on an apple. He made the blessing on the apple, he ate the apple. He turned around immediately, he says, I don't understand it. I'm just like the Rebbe. Why am I not a Rebbe? I too make a blessing on an apple, and I eat the apple also. What's different between him? He holds the apple just like I hold the apple. He bites into the apple like I bite into my apple. He makes the blessing before he makes the blessing after. I do exactly the same thing. A wise man came and said, there's a difference between you and the Rebbe, because the Rebbe eats the apple in order to make the blessing, but you make the blessing in order to eat the apple. Where is the priority? We can identify it for ourselves. When we find ourselves with a desire of anything, we can question, are we doing the activity because the desire is leading us along, and then we kind of turn it into something Kedusha, something of holiness? Or is it that we desire to do holy things, and therefore, unfortunately, we must engage in physicality in order to achieve the holy things? This is the question that we need to ask ourselves, and this is what makes the difference between the person who will not be affected, who will not be liable for this punishment known as Hibbut HaKever. And we can encounter it any time in our lives. We can change ourselves today if we haven't been doing it before, and say from this point onwards, I will work on myself as best as I can in order to work on this level whereby I turn everything into something for the sake of Hashem, instead of taking that thing and using it for my own personal benefit, my own personal pleasure. Of course, practically speaking, most of us are not quite on that level, and therefore, according to this, the Alter Rebbe explains to us that there is this concept of the Hibbut HaKever. Devarim Betelim, the Alter Rebbe continues, we'll just read another sentence or two, that on things that are Devarim Betelim, they serve no purpose, they're a waste of time, things that have no real reason for them, for doing them, beheter, and it's permitted. Kagon, for example, Am ha'aretz, if you take an ignoramus, an ignorant person, she'eino yachol lilmod, and unfortunately, he can't study. He never went to Cheder, he doesn't know how to study, he can't read the Hebrew words, he can't read any language, practically speaking, he can't read, poor fellow. Tzarik letaher nafsho mitumazo, the klipazo. He would have to purify his soul from this impurity of this klipa, al yedei gilgula the Kaf HaKela, through going through a process of what's called the this gilgul, this rolling, or this process of going through the Kaf HaKela, which refers to the slingshot. As it's brought down there in the Zohar over there. And what we mean over here is the following. When we speak about a speech related to Devarim Betelim, so I speak something which is filled with narishkat, nonsense, just general talk. How's it going today? What's the weather like? What's happening here? What's going on there? Just general talk. And it's permissible because it's not forbidden. We're just speaking general talk. I'm not hurting anybody with my speech. I'm not talking negatively about anybody. All I'm doing is engaging in a general discussion. This in itself is also not on the side of holiness. It is on the side of unholiness because it serves no practical purpose. And it turns out that this fellow, who is just an ignorant fellow, that's how he spends his days. Comes out though, he can get a tikkun. He can get a repair for what he's done. Even though what he's done is not 100% permissible, there is still a way to correct it. And he goes through a process known as the Kaf HaKela, which is known as the slingshot in the world to come. Now, the slingshot is a type of a catapult in which, physically speaking, if we compare it to a slingshot in the physical world, we have somebody placed onto a chair of some kind that is attached to a beam of some kind, and then it's attached to a rope, and he gets released and he goes flying in the air and he ends up somewhere else. Now imagine that he's thrown from one slingshot to another, and he gets thrown from the one side to the other. But in spiritual terms, that's not what takes place. And this is really what takes place. He gets thrown from the two sides of spirituality. He gets taken from the side of holiness, and he gets thrown into the side of that is unholy. He gets taken again from the side of the unholy, and he gets thrown into the side of holy. Why? Because he must go through this experience of the air, of the Devarim Betelim, the nourishka, the words that he spoke that had no real purpose to them. Why did he have to use the air to say these words? He should have used the air to speak words of kedusha, of holiness. Instead, he spoke out nonsense talk, irrelevant talk, foolishness. Why did he have to say that? Therefore, he gets a punishment, midah keneged midah, measure for measure. The punishment is that he must begin to experience what holiness is. And the moment that his soul picks up on the holiness, it gets thrown into the world of the unholy, something that is evil. Now imagine the pain of the soul that experiences and knows what's holy, and then gets put into a place which is unholy. And just at the time that he's experiencing this tragedy of what's going on, he gets put back into the place of holiness. This is a punishment for the soul. It is known as Kaf HaKela, and it's the punishment that the ignorant person, for example, would go through because he did not use his mouth to speak words of Torah. At this point in time, we're going to conclude this shiur, and I thank you very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet. My site is www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed this shiur, I ask you please to like the shiur, to like this video, to subscribe to my channel, to click on the bell, and of course to share the video with your family and friends, and let people know about these videos and what you're getting out of it. Please place a comment below if you've gained something from it. I'd like to know what you're gaining, what you're learning, and how you're growing from these shiurim, because of course these shiurim are not just simply academic exercises, but rather we're trying to learn this material in order to find out how we can improve ourselves, how we can do better, how we can be better. So I look forward to another shiur. And please feel free to be in touch with me, especially during this time of the coronavirus, where so many people are going through so many challenges and difficulties. Sometimes we just need somebody to talk to or discuss life, Torah, whatever it may be on your mind. Please be in touch with me. I'd be delighted to be in touch with you. So I'm Eliyahu Shir, signing off from www.lovingkindness.co, wishing you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.